All right. Well, hi, everyone. Good evening. So great to see so many people hopping on for our webinar tonight. I am Summer Boger, president of the Eagle Forum of California, here with our lovely National Eagle Forum president, Chris Ullman, and our state secretary, Orleen Kurla, who is also our former president for California State. And we have a great guest with us tonight, Margaret Byfield. Who's going to be speaking to us about something that you definitely need to know about that you probably don't have a lot of information on. It's so great. I was kind of tipped on this information and gave it to Chris Ullman, and I'm sure she was hearing it from multiple different sources. But very soon after I contacted her, I noticed that our National Eagle Forum put out a newsletter with a lot of information about the subject you're going to be hearing about tonight. So I appreciate our National Eagle Forum for all of the work that they've been doing regarding this. And super excited that we're going to be tackling this on our state webinar tonight. And then we have our state conference coming up. It's going to be April 6th. We have great speakers. Alex Newman's actually one of them. He called me today. He thought he was speaking on our webinar today, and he was very relieved that it was not going to be him. So anyway, I'm glad that we get to hear from Margaret tonight. She's going to be a breath of fresh air, I'm sure. And so anyway, if you want to find out more about our state conference, it's going to be at Knott's Berry Farm at the hotel there this year, April 6th, and we definitely invite all of you to come join us to hear from great speakers. Go to our website. It's eagleforumca.us, and on there you can see all of our great speakers and you can purchase your tickets. And we'd love to have you join us. So without hesitation, let's go ahead and hear from Orleen, who is going to introduce Margaret this evening.
Thank you very much, Summer. Before I do, Chris Ullman, did you have anything you wanted to give us as a national message?
So sorry.
Well, I thank everybody for being on this important Zoom webinar, and I want to thank Margaret for all the work that she has done. This is really a very interesting issue, a very important issue, and I know Margaret's going to tell us that even though there was a victory last week in one of the battles, the war is not over. And so I'm on this webinar tonight, like you are, to get the latest information so that we can fight it up here and we can fight it around the country, and we can make sure that we put a stake in the heart of these natural asset companies once and for all. So thank you so much, Margaret. Thank you, Summer, and thank you, Orleen. It's great to be with you guys.
Thank you, Chris. We're delighted to have you with us. And for those of you on the call who have not yet joined Eagle Farm, we are so appreciative of Chris and her leadership. And I would encourage everyone to go to our national website, eagleforum.org, and you find the most amazing information on every subject. And it's so well organized, you can find it with just a click of the little mouse, and you've got this lineup of amazing information. On our speakers from the Eagle Council Conference last September are all there with outstanding messages. So I have the great honor and privilege of introducing Margaret, because I know her from way back when we were first finding out about Agenda 21 that had really hit our area big time back in 2006. We discovered that all of the creeks that run through our property were going to have a 100-foot setback on each side. If this planning commission plan went through, that would have gotten thousands of acres of land off from any usage, especially with all the wineries that we have here in Santa Rosa and surrounding areas in Sonoma County. And so there was a big protest about it, and fortunately they kind of backpedaled on that. But Margaret came and took a picture of me standing in front of our creek that made it on the cover of her newsletter. So that was a real honor. And that's how I first met her and heard about her. And she has been in this battle for 30 years. She must have started when she was 3 because she looks so young.
Agreed.
she and her family were fighting this battle in Nevada, a 27-year lawsuit with Hague versus the federal government that were trying to take away their property rights. So she kind of was weaned on property rights battles and is still in this huge battle. And she has an amazing repertoire of experiences that she has had and is leading several amazing organizations. But her Steward of the Range organization they started in Nevada is now Stewards of Liberty, and it's providing liberty and understanding our property rights for people across the nation, maybe across the world, who knows. But this battle has gotten so extensive now, especially since Biden signed his 30 by 30 executive order, and I'm sure she'll explain that to you as well. And this national asset companies was just a branch of that, which she will explain. And I will not take away any more thunder from her explanation. So we will now turn the time over to you, Margaret, and we're so delighted that you are here with us.
Well, thank you, Arlene. And it's great to see you again. It has been a lot of years, although I do know I have aged since the last time we met.
You do not look it at all. I know I have.
Well, I think I have advanced in age the most since Biden's been in office. I will say that. He's kept me up a lot more hours than Trump ever did. But well, thank you all. And thanks for being here. And just thanks for having me on. A couple things I want to say up front. We had a phenomenal victory last week, and I don't want us to miss how important that was, what we beat back, and why we did it, the power that was behind it. I think that's something that I can share with this audience because of the faith that you all share. But you know, as Dan and I have been fighting the natural asset company issue, we've actually been tracking it since September of 2021. And it's one of those things that God kind of put in our path that we wanted to ignore. But of course, he wasn't going to let us ignore it. And as we really kind of marshaled the forces to fight this battle that came on us very quickly, and this would have been authorized November 18th if we hadn't been able to get the forces to stand up against this. But Dan and I, when we were in the middle of this and explaining it to people, we could just feel the hand of God in it. I mean, the doors that were opening, you just knew you were in the middle of this battle that he was orchestrating. And it was such a cool feeling to have, and then to see him deliver the victory. When we started training on 30 by 30 back in 2021, most of the presentations that I would do, I would end with the proverb, which is Proverb 21:31, which is, the horse is prepared for battle, but God will deliver the victory. And that's really what we saw happen here. And I read that proverb to mean that is our role. We are the ones who are to prepare for battle and to execute in a manner that's obedient to him as we fight these issues. But ultimately, he's the one who's going to deliver the battle. We do our part, he's going to do his part. And this NAC victory is exactly that. The second thing I want to point out before I really dive into the information is the first group that reached out to us on this that was not in our property rights nucleus. In other words, we have a lot of organizations we work with specifically on property rights issues like these. But the first group to reach out that is not specifically focused on property rights was Eagle Forum. You guys were and Chris and Cindy, you were the two who reached out personally to me and said, what can we do to help? And I don't know if you guys understand how important that was, because if we were just talking to the property rights group, we wouldn't have been able to spread this to an audience that could really help us impact and push this back. And so you guys opened that door to a whole new audience. And so I'm very appreciative to you, and you need to take a lot of credit for the victory that we just had. So I think what I'd like to do is go ahead and dive into maybe a little background on 30 by 30. I don't know how familiar your audience is with that agenda, but that's the agenda that really leads into the NAC agenda. And then I want to talk about the next phase, the next battle that we have, which is natural capital accounts. So I think I will take just a little bit of time and walk you through 30 by 30 so you have that foundation. And I'm going to share my screen, I think.
Oh, let me switch you.
Sure.
You can
No problem.
go right ahead.
All right, thank you. I want to go ahead and show you a few slides so that we can kind of walk through this, and I think we can run through this pretty quickly. But 30 by 30 is really the issue that Biden launched in 2021, 6 days into office. So we actually were expecting the Biden administration to do this. We had been studying the environmental movement, and we knew that the agenda they were going to be putting forward is this agenda called 30 by 30. So it wasn't a surprise to us when Biden launched it, and he launched it 6 days into office on January 27th, 2021. Let me give you a little background on what 30 by 30 is. It is an international agenda to permanently protect 30% of the land and ocean worldwide. And when I say permanently protect, what they mean is land that people don't use. So it's really they started, very gently and easily, where they just start restricting things and locking down things, but little by little, they get it into that protected status to where it's land that people are not allowed to utilize. And so it's actually been advanced in other countries. If you've been following what's happening in the Netherlands with the farmer protests and the loss of land there, they have been under a 30 by 30 program since about year 2000. It's called Natura 2000. And so they are much further along, and we can watch what's happening there to see what's going to happen to us if we allow 30 by 30 to get implemented here in America. So that's when it was first launched, we knew it was coming. And so we actually had a pretty good grassroots campaign already planned, you might say. We had the first local government, the first county in Garfield County, Colorado, passed a resolution within 3 weeks opposing this. And then we were able to get that out, spread across the country. 3 months into the campaign, we had 15 governors sign on opposing this. We had about 70 U.S. congressional representatives opposing it. And we had the media narrative. We advanced that so that in the media, it was called a land grab. It was a 30 by 30 land grab. We were successful in doing that. So when Biden came out with his first report, which was supposed to tell us how he was going to implement this program, he did a few things that were very interesting. Number one, first thing he did was he changed the name. It was no longer called 30 by 30. Then he changed it to America the Beautiful. So yeah, exactly. A couple other things he did was he said that this program was not about protecting the land, it was about conserving the land. But then in this report, they said defining what conservation means is actually difficult because it means too many things to do to different people. Meaning they didn't want to put a definite definition on it because then they could be held accountable to that. So the third thing they did was they didn't define what lands qualified. So basically it was a document that was pretty useless to try to figure out how they were going to implement the program. But following them and following how the administration was starting to move to implement this, we had a pretty clear idea of what they would be doing. But I want to talk a little bit about the basis for 30 by 30. It's really based on all of the science that backs up the climate crisis narrative, which, if you know anything about that, that's not science. What backs up the climate crisis narrative are projections into the future. It's not based on hard science. They take models and they put inputs into it, most of which are subjective. And then they extrapolate that out, 10, 20, 30 years, and they come up with this conclusion that in the coming generations, we're going to lose over 1 million species. They're going to go extinct. And that's what the whole climate science is based on, are these projections. And so it's not true science. So they also say that nature is disappearing because we are becoming overpopulated. We are losing nature, and therefore humanity is going to suffer. But that also is not correct. And that's why I show you this chart. Rob Gordon did this really good piece that was published by the Heritage Foundation. And he went through and he basically took a look at the hard science, the data that we do have that is dependable in America, the years 2001 through 2016, and took a look at the land conversion in America. And this chart shows you that developed land is in the red at the top. And it shows you the change in land use from 2021 to 2016. Now, if you're not seeing a difference in percentage in that, that's because there is basically no statistical difference in land change in America. So sure, there are areas that are being developed, but there's also a lot of areas that are going back into nature. So we are not in a nature crisis in America. The second part of this that I think is useful to know is that the percentage of developed land in America is a total of 5.3% of all land in America. That's not a lot. That's where we have our homes, our schools, our hospitals, our churches, our places of work, our grocery stores is 5.3% of America. And half of that is what they consider open space. So it's our golf courses, our city parks. Half of the 5.3% is open space. So the actual built environment in America is closer to 2.5%.
Wow.
So we are not in a development crisis. So that's the facts. That's hard data that we can support. So let me tell you a couple of things that the 30 by 30 agenda advanced. One of the things they said when they launched this in America is that currently in America, only 12% of the land is permanently protected, and they are trying to reach 30%. So what makes up that 12%? We know what that is because it comes out of the USGS gap analysis. That's national parks, wilderness areas, permanent conservation easements on private land. Now, one of the things to understand is they say that 2/3 of the development change happening in America is happening on private land, but only 1% of the land is permanently protected. So it's a huge concern of theirs. So a lot of people thought when this agenda came out, it's only going to impact the federal land states. That is incorrect. There's a huge target on the private landowners through this program. Let me skip that. The other thing that I think is important to know is that one of the things that you will see repeated in their literature over and over, and it really comes out of this first report, How Much Nature Should America Keep? This report is by the Center for American Progress. It's an organization that is a very progressive organization. Their agenda is to make America a socialist agenda. They don't hide that. They're very upfront about that. And 30 by 30 is key to that agenda. Why? Because to accomplish socialism, you cannot do that in a nation where the people own the property. If you have property rights, you can defend liberty. And a good way to remember that is either you have the right to own property or you are property. They understand that. That's why they want our property. So one of the things they say in this report, and then you will see the Biden administration regurgitate and all the environmental groups, is that we are losing a football field worth of habitat every 30 seconds in America. Well, that's really interesting because when you do the math on it, it's pretty funny. That totals 3,000 acres a day, 1.1 million acres a year, and 11 million acres in 10 years. Okay, what they're trying to get to is they are trying to add another 18% of land permanently protected by 2023. That is 400 million acres. But the problem, as they define it, if you believe their math, is that the conversion of nature to developed land is really only 11 million acres a year, according to their figures. So the question becomes, why are they attempting to take an additional 400 million acres and place it in conservation in 9 short years? This is not about conservation. This is about control. And I love what Governor Ricketts, now Senator Ricketts from Nebraska, said when 30 by 30 first came out. What they were attempting to do and are attempting to do is permanently protect one state of Nebraska for the next 9 years, or 2 states of Texas. It's a tremendous amount of land that they are trying to lock up. And here is a really good illustration, I think. This was published by the National Geographic. The National Geographic has been pushing the 30 by 30 agenda worldwide. And in 2019, they published this article showing what America needed to do in order to reach the 30%. So the small box is what 12% looks like. If you put all of our protected lands together, that's to scale. And the 30% is what America would look like if they accomplished 30 by 30. All right, so I've talked a little bit about the report. The first report that they released is this one where they changed the name to America the Beautiful. And I've already pretty well covered that, so I'm gonna go through that and go ahead and launch into the next phase of this whole battle. When we were fighting 30 by 30 in September of 2021, we got notice of the New York Stock Exchange and a group called Intrinsic Exchange Group, which is a group that is funded by the Rockefeller Foundation and other entities, supported by World Wildlife Fund, Conservation International. So think of the same entities that are pushing the climate crisis agenda, the net zero agenda, the decarbonization agenda, the 30 by 30 agenda. They're the same people that have put together this intrinsic exchange group concept. And what they did is the New York Stock Exchange announced that they were creating a new investment vehicle called natural asset companies. And the purpose for this new natural asset company was to enroll our protected lands. So think of the lands that they were pushing to place in protection through the 30 by 30 agenda. So our national parks, state parks, private lands with conservation easements, to enroll them in these natural asset companies for the wealthy elite to profit off of our protected lands. So 30 by 30 is essentially a clearing of title, clearing Americans off of our land, placing title in either environmental land trusts, the ENGOs, or governments. So consolidating our land and then allowing those to be enrolled in this investment vehicle so that entities like BlackRock, sovereign wealth nations from our foreign adversaries like China and Russia could invest in these and control our assets. This is scary stuff.
That's
I mean,
right.
what they are have attempted to do is scary stuff. So I'll walk you through what they proposed. They say the other element of this, which is I think harder to get our arms around, is that not only are they talking about physical land assets, but they have created this new asset that they call ecological performance rights. And really what this is they are trying to quantify and monetize natural processes and things they call ecosystem services. This is the hard part to get your arms around because it doesn't make any sense to the common person. Or I shouldn't say common person, anybody with a good head. It does not make common sense to you. Because what they're trying to quantify and monetize are things that simply are not property rights for somebody to own. A good understanding of property is it's something that you can exclude others from. It's a very simple, basic explanation of what is property. In other words, I have a piece of land. I can decide who comes on it and who doesn't. They're talking about excluding people from things like photosynthesis, pollination, of course, clean air, which we're a little familiar with through carbon credits, biodiversity credits. But these are all natural processes that have never been monetized before because number one, every life depends on them. You can't exclude somebody from breathing clean air, nor should you. And so it really just makes no logical sense that they attempted to do this, but this is exactly what they attempted to do. And I think a lot of it comes down to because they have ruined our existing economy. They have us so in debt. I think they're all, including our federal government, looking for a way to prop up all this debt that they have created. And so one of the ways is to create a brand new asset arbitrarily out of thin air, literally. And that's really what they were attempting to do here. So they say that the asset value of our economy worldwide is $1.540 trillion. If it's just based on our land assets, the real assets. But once you add in the monetization of these natural processes, it increases our economy to 5,000 trillion. And that's an arbitrary number. They make that number up. It's not based on something that people buy and sell. It's completely made out of thin air. So it's really crazy. And I think, the first time that we saw this, which was back, as I said earlier, in September of 2021, we did a real deep dive into this, but my husband, Dan, and I talked about it a lot. And we kind of thought, this is just crazy. Are they really going to try and do this? And of course, we knew that they would because of who was behind it. But it was hard to get our arms around at the time. So here's a look at the entities that were backing this effort. So you will recognize a lot of these. This is off of the IEG website. All right. So in tandem with this attempt to create this new investment vehicle, in September of 2022, the White House released a draft of this national strategy to develop statistics for environmental economic decisions. So we started tracking this at the same time. And basically, what the federal government portion of this agenda, what they're trying to do is also quantify and monetize these natural processes, like we've been talking about, but not for the purposes of necessarily of making them an investment product, but instead of being able to place them on the federal balance sheet in order to prop up our collateral base, to increase the national debt. And we also think to create a new way to tax the American people to pay for the national debt. So in this new White House strategy, what they are proposing, or actually what they're implementing now, is creating a line item on the federal balance sheet for something called natural capital accounts. And this would be where they would quantify and monetize all of the value of the natural processes to put on the federal balance sheet. And they intend for this to inform our GDP. So they intend for it to really fundamentally change our economy. And there's a lot of questions that come into this, such as this market manipulation. What is that going to do to our economy? Our economy is based on what a consumer will buy. I mean, that's what drives our market. This isn't something that consumers will buy. This is something that the federal government is infusing into our society, into our economy, for a political goal, for an agenda, for the green agenda. It's something that prior to the ESGs, which is also an attempt to do this in a different form, the political goals have not been a part of our economy for good reason. They have no basis being in there, but that's exactly what they are trying to do through the natural capital accounts. So here's what happened. Okay, so we knew all of these things were coming. We actually started, to our membership, we started writing on this. Cindy was at our national summit that we held in Dallas. And so she heard the first time I ever talked about this publicly. And I don't know if you remember, Cindy, but before I went out there and started talking about this, I'm going, boy, I hope this audience just doesn't think I'm crazy, because this is one of the craziest things I've ever heard. But I walked through this with our audience there because we knew it was coming. We knew that we were going to have to face this. Little did we know, the conference was September 21st. Little did we know that just a few days later, we were going to be faced with the proposed rule. So on October 4th, the Security Exchange Commission released a proposed rule to approve the creation of these natural capital, or NACs, natural asset companies, on the New York Stock Exchange. And when they did this, They allowed 21 days of comment with the intent to make a decision in 45 days. That decision was going to be November 18th, and nobody knew about this. There was no press release. We were very fortunate that we picked it up, and we have a very good friend who found it and sent it to us. Thankfully, he was also at the conference, so he was looking for it. But they gave us no time to really build a force to fight this. Fortunately, we had actually sat down with Senator Ricketts and talked to him about this and let him know that we knew this was coming back in April of 2023. And so after that meeting, he said, get me a briefing. And so we did a deep dive briefing for him, and that's what we started distributing back in April. And that allowed his staff to really vet everything. We also did a letter for him that he could, with a list of questions to the SEC. And so when they came out with this proposed rule on October 4th, he was ready to go. And he got Senator Crapo and Risch, both from Idaho. Crapo being on the banking committee was very important, to send the letter to the SEC. I believe it was Senator Ricketts' early action, and then the comments, the substantive comments, we were able to get into the record within that 25-day time, which bought us a delay. So we always, in these battles, we always say delay is victory, because it gives us more time to rally the forces. And that's exactly what we needed on this. So the Security Exchange Commission delayed their decision for another 45 days. They did not reopen comments, but they delayed their decision. So that meant they wouldn't make a decision until January 2nd. So during that time, I think is the time Chris, you and I met, and you stepped up and you started marshaling the Eagle Forum forces. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we were able to get two other really key actions to happen, which I think were strategically helped us get this pushback again. And the first was, God bless Representative Hagman. I don't know if you guys ever work with Harriet Hagman from Wyoming. She's the one who beat Liz Cheney. She's a land attorney. She's also a friend from many years back. And I dropped something off at her office. It was a 2-minute phone call that she made to me where I gave her just a quick briefing on natural assets. And she said, okay, I'm on it. And believe me, she was on it. She led a defund provision to the financial services bill, which unfortunately the bill got pulled. But, and then she organized a letter to request that the comments be reopened, and then request for documents. And it was signed by 31 of her colleagues, including a number of key chairmanships. So Representative Hagman did Omen's work on this. One of the reasons that that's so important is because we had actually been working with some members in the Financial Services Committee who has oversight over the SEC. They had a briefing from the Intrinsic Exchange Commission and the New York Stock Exchange, and because of that briefing, decided to stand down. In other words, that committee decided they would take no action until after the rule was approved, and then they would consider legislation to pull it back. So they literally abjected their authority in this fight. And so when Representative Hagman stood up and led the effort, it was just, it was so important that she did that.
I just took over for a second so I can mute the couple of people that aren't muted. So give me just a second.
Sure, no problem.
You can keep talking.
Okay, I'm actually gonna stop sharing. You guys okay? Because I don't know that we need to look at any more of the documents. So that was really important. The other thing that happened was Utah Treasurer Marlo Oaks, God bless him. He is one of the first people that we reached out to, and he immediately got an article in the Wall Street Journal, which alerted the business community. And then he led the state effort. So we had 23 state financial officers send a letter requiring that they reopen comments. So now we had Congress and we had 23 states weighing in and saying, hold up. You need to really think about this before you authorize that. I think those two actions really helped us to get that second delay. So what happened during right before Christmas is the SEC decided to reopen comments for another 21 days, and then that they instituted proceeding, which would have led to a hearing before the commission. So that was the other key thing that happened. So we got our second delay. And then with that, we had just so many good comments come in. When the first comment period closed on September 25th, I think there were maybe 12 comments in. And fortunately, most of them were ours. But by the time of January 17th, there were over 2,000 comments in. And there were a lot of very good substantive comments. And my husband, Dan, went through and counted and only counted it about 10 that were pro, meaning we overwhelmingly showed that the people did not want this. And that was really important. In that time frame too, another very key thing happened. 25 state attorney generals issued a letter that was very powerful and laid out all of the ways that this rule violated the law. And it's a very quick read. It's very crisp. And if you want to read something that really hits these guys hard in a very piercing way, it's a fun letter to read, and I highly encourage it. It's not very long, but it's definitely will give you a good feeling about our states and how they took this thing on. But I want to tell you the other key thing that happened, which was vital. I told you that the Financial Services Committee stood down. They had the SEC oversight. So our thinking is that New York Stock Exchange and IEG thought they were in the clear. They weren't going to have to face oversight, so they could get this thing through. Well, thankfully, we had another brave representative, Chairman Bruce Westerman, Chairman of the House Resources Committee. This issue is something that concerned him greatly. And so even though he didn't have direct oversight over SEC, he made the decision that since Resources does have oversight over the federal lands, which could be enrolled in these NACs, he would initiate oversight. So about 4 days before they pulled this rule, his committee released a letter to the SEC to initiate a probe. They initiated oversight. And I think that was the final straw where the New York Stock Exchange and IEG decided, okay, wait a minute, we're not going to withstand this kind of an inquiry. And so God bless Chairman Westerman, because he had to find a way to make this happen because he didn't have direct oversight, but he did because of how important this was, and he knew to our country. So 4 big heroes that I want to ask you guys to stand up and support and just recognize. Already, and that's Senator Ricketts, Representative Hagman, Utah Treasurer Oaks, and Chairman Westerman. They are our real heroes on this battle. They acted swiftly, quickly, and boldly. And of course, there were thousands of others in this fight too. And I don't want to diminish anybody's contribution because it took every bit of it to push this thing back. But I think they were in leadership positions and they used that position appropriately to push this back. So I'm very appreciative to that. So the next phase, we have the NACs pushed back, and I look at it as we won round 1. And it's a huge victory. We beat Wall Street, IEG, the Rockefeller Foundation, SEC, the Biden administration. We beat them all, and the environmental groups. And when I say we, I mean every one of us that was involved in this fight. So that is something that I hope everybody takes away and realizes we can defeat the beast. We really can. And it definitely starts on our knees. And I know you guys know what I'm saying. That's how we fight. And frankly, that's how we win. And this NAC victory is case in point for that. But that's round 1. So the fight isn't over. We still have the national strategy to create the natural capital accounts that we need to start digging out from. And I really look at the NAC fight as kind of an airstrike. In other words, we had to very strategically and quickly hit key targets with few resources, but very strategic resources to stop this. And I look at the natural capital accounts fight with the federal government more as trench warfare. They initiated this strategy formally January of 2023. They are on a 15-year plan to get this entrenched in the federal government, and they are doing it through 27 agencies. So when I say trench warfare, it's like we have to figure out how to dig it out of 27 agencies. And some of it is already pretty deeply ingrained just from some of the documents that I've seen. But I think what's really key for you guys to do and to be aware of, number one is first just understanding what it is, which sitting on this forum hopefully will give you that background. And the second is we will be alerting you when key things happen, potentially through legislation or other ways that we might be able to push back and dig this thing out. And I will just do my best to keep you all alerted so that you can weigh in and know when it's strategic to move and to marshal your forces so that we can hopefully do the same thing again on this front as well. But that's really the next step. And what is so, I think what's really diabolical about the natural capitals accounts part of this is the federal government is really trying to create a new asset by monetizing these natural processes. And in doing that, they're also claiming ownership. If they put those assets on the federal balance sheet, they are claiming that they own it. It's either going to be that, or they are claiming that our property, the property that those natural assets are attached to, have a higher value than they're currently being taxed on. So if you think about that, IEG claims that this new natural asset economy is worth 4 times what it is today. So think about it. If you have a piece of property that the tax on it is $10,000, now think about having to pay a $40,000 tax bill. That's really what we're talking about. That's where this could go, where it could lead if we don't get it stopped. And what that's going to do is that's going to rob the American people of the property.
Mm-hmm.
And from the beginning, the 30 by 30 agenda, we've said from the very beginning, it is not about conservation. It is about control. It is not about whether we are going to use our resources. It's about who. Who is going to use our resources? Is it going to be us, the American people, the private individuals? Or is it going to be the government and the consolidated entities and the world elite who are trying to gain control of all of these assets worldwide? And that's really the battle that is playing out. And why that is so critical, which I know this audience knows this, but I want to reinforce it. What's so important about property rights is property rights, our ability to own property, is what allows us to secure our individual liberty. It is how we control our government, because we control the natural resource base. We control the money.
How do I get back to the picture here?
We control the money. That gives us, we the people, the power to protect our liberties and ensure that we have a limited government. And so they know that. That's why they're coming for our land and our natural assets, our natural resources. And we need to understand how important that is and protect our property rights and therefore protect our liberty. It is about land and liberty. And I think that pretty well covers it. So I'm happy to take questions, or if there's anything you guys think I missed or need to know, I'd be happy to help answer those questions.
Wow, that was absolutely amazing, Margaret. And you presented that so beautifully. I think even the common ordinary person who doesn't even own property could understand how important this is and how concerned we are. I would just like you to tell us one more time those, was it 5 key people that we need to express our gratitude to, and how do we reach them?
Yeah, the four, really, it's four that were really integral. Senator Ricketts from Nebraska.
Okay.
And Senator Ricketts was also our leader on 30 by 30. So he's been in this fight for a while, which is one reason we were able to go straight to him in April, because we knew he would get it immediately. The second is Representative Harriet Hagman from Wyoming. And she's a freshman congressman, but boy, she doesn't act like one. She fights like a veteran and she knows how to use the process. So she is just wonderful. You know, we were on with her, just to tell you how involved she is. Her staff, we were on a call with her staff today because they wanted to start talking about the next steps. So they are not slowing down. They're not stopping at all. They know that there's more to this battle and they're already working on it. So that tells you a little bit about Harriet. The third one is Utah Treasurer Marlo Oaks. And I want to share with you just our experiences with him. The first time that I met him was at the Heartland Institute's Climate Crisis. They do a event, I think, every year where they bring those who have been fighting against the climate crisis science, the scientists worldwide, together in one meeting. And it was in Orlando last February, and Treasurer Oaks spoke there. And it was actually there at that meeting, I heard him speak on ESGs, and I thought, oh my gosh, this guy can get what's going on natural assets. So I did visit with him after that. And but then when the rule came out, we had a conference call with him and we explained it again. And then he remembered that we had talked about it. And so he had still had my call, and he had my card, and he called me. And really, since that time, we have probably been we work daily with him now. And when what I love about what he did is that he did a deep dive into all the material. He wanted to read it all himself. So he doesn't work off of talking points that staff writes for him.
Mhm.
He does a deep dive. He owns the material. He knows exactly why he believes and fights for the position that he believes. And I really respect our leaders who will do that. He is one of those. And then he reached out not only to other treasurers, making personal phone calls, but he's the reason that the attorney generals came on board, and a number of other state leaders. So I would say, since he was alerted to NACS, he has been working on this daily. Now, the other part of this I'm going to share with you is that right now he's being attacked in his own state by people in his own party. And I think it's a combination of the strong stand that he took. He not only did he fight the ESG battle, but now he has fought the NAC battle. And we know that there are people on the other side who would have liked to have seen this succeed. So inside the state, he's going to be facing some battles. So that's why I say it's a really good time just to support him in every way you can, especially if you're in Utah, because he's a real hero for us on this. And then the fourth one is Chairman Westerman. Chairman Bruce Westerman from Arkansas, chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee.
And is he a senator or representative?
He's a representative.
Okay. Great, thank you. We will make lots of thank you calls and letters to them. We got to hear this wonderful state treasurer speak at our Eagle Farm Council about the ESG, and he explained it so well then, and he is an amazing, courageous man.
Yes, he is.
Any other questions that anyone has for Margaret? For some of you, this is probably so inspiring or shocking that it's hard to formulate a question. But
I have a question from Alabama.
Okay.
And I'm just, this is probably my second meeting hearing about this. I have a problem with property tax to begin with, but I know the Supreme Court has decided to hear a case. I can't remember what the issue started out as, but basically the man that initially sued in a lower court was being taxed on property or capital gains or something where he had not sold for a higher value, but something was being assessed at a higher value, the same way we do with property taxes, right? But he hadn't sold it, so he had not realized the increase in value, hadn't received it in his hand. Just like if you buy a $200,000 house, they value it now at 500, you're taxed at the 500. It's a scam because you haven't sold your house for $500,000. So I'm hoping maybe that case will start affecting property taxes as well. I know in Alabama, we've got some property tax bills where the state and city can now take, the hope in these bills is that they can take your property for delinquent taxes sooner. Then they are not liable for the property tax when they set up a land bank authority to own the house at that point, which I would think would encourage a government to do that more and more so that the people in that state could sell to the land, to the natural asset companies, should they get this passed. So I can't believe y'all saw this. I am so thrilled that y'all saw it. This is beyond upsetting because the fact that y'all did get so many important people to listen is God's in that. I'm so proud to hear that our Attorney General is in that letter. I'm going to look at that letter and see. But I want to thank you all. And I've always questioned the natural asset of water. I know what bottled water is in so many cases with natural disasters, with mission trips. But it concerns me also bottling water, and other people now own water that's not even in the rain cycle, right? It's not even in the natural cycle. So I imagine this could really ill affect ownership of water. So this will just be interesting to watch. When you just said that they'll either claim they own your land, the assets on it, or they'll tax you at the new much higher value that they are telling you now it's worth. That goes straight back to what I hope that Supreme Court case. Sorry, I'm done.
No, I think those are really astute comments, and you definitely grasp the issue. I mean, all of those what ifs, I think, are definitely in play here. That's part of the scary part, is we don't really know how they're going to utilize all this, but there's a million ways they can that are not good for the American people.
Thank you, Lou, for that question and comment. Let's have David Campbell. His hand is raised.
Thanks, Summer. Good to see you, Orlean. And Margaret, thank you very much for your presentation. And I heard a couple of key points come through clearly. Deprivation of property rights compromises security. And maybe that's the one for me to sort of pivot on, to better understand the motivation of that underlies this sort of policy work. Three things come to mind. One is to, by quantifying the value of natural resources, one would be to put it out into the market. So it's an investment, it's a commodity, it lends itself to equity, that investment, that sort of thing. The other is to make our country and other countries more accountable or manipulable to, and by the world, as it were, the UN and World Economic Forum and these sorts of globalist interests and enterprises. The third that comes to mind is to make our country, again, in a market sense, let's say because of our 34 trillion indebtedness, to make us more accessible to international interests who might want to buy up pieces or portions or fractions of our country and our natural resources. Do those options kind of make sense? And what's your thinking along those lines?
Yeah, they do. And especially the last one. What's really interesting is in the proposed rule, Exhibit 5 was the new manual language that the New York Stock Exchange would be accepting. And it says explicitly foreign investors were encouraged. And there was nothing that would have prevented a foreign adversary from investing in these companies. So, I mean, I think you really landed on a key piece that I really didn't go into. But first off, you could, and Exhibit 3 said one of the assets that could be enrolled were national parks specifically. So what you would have happen, what we foresaw was that you would have a NAC created in, say, a mineral-rich area. The other thing that a NAC had to do was protect the resources. So there could not be any mining or oil and gas development or anything that was non-replenishable. Everything had to be sustainable. So the purpose of the NAC was to protect the resources, which then raised the question, how are you ever going to make an investment return on something that doesn't produce anything? So that was another big question mark out there. But what you would have with the NAC, what we foresaw is it was an ideal vehicle for China, Sovereign Wealth Fund, to invest and control a NAC that was created in a mineral-rich area in order to keep us from developing our natural resources while they developed theirs and, of course, made a killing on it. The other thing that was really interesting about this rule is that, so we know that when you put those kind of sustainability restrictions on land, and this is our area of field, and Orlean can speak to this too, that once you put that sustainable development noose around an area of land, whether landowners want to be in it or not, that noose just starts squeezing, and eventually landowners are not going to be able to do what they need to do with their land. And so it drives the landowners out of business. And then in those situations, the only ones who are there that are willing to buy the land, because now it's not worth very much, are the people who already control it, functionally control it. So we could foresee where the sustainability requirements in a NAC area would eventually force all the landowners to sell their land to the NAC, whether they wanted to or not. Okay, now here's the interesting part. There was one thing that a NAC could do to get delisted from the New York Stock Exchange. And that was if they violated the sustainability requirement. Meaning, think about this. China invests in one of our NACs that's mineral rich. They gain control of all the assets, and then they start mining it and drilling it. And the only penalty is they're delisted, meaning all restrictions are off.
Oh,
So if you were China and you wanted to take down our nation without a fight, this was the open door that we were allowing to have happen. That's how diabolical this was. That's how serious this was. And it still, boggles my mind that this was going to happen November 18th if we didn't have some key people step up. I mean, we were that close to this moment in this country. That's why I say this is absolutely a God thing, that this nation was saved from that. But you were very astute to point that out.
Ultimately about their control of us, not our conservation of our own natural resources.
You nailed it. You nailed it.
Thank you very
Mhm.
much.
Well, this is very concerning, and when I found out about it, I put it in our online newsletter that I email out. If you're not on that newsletter and you would like to be, you can put your email in the chat, or you can email me directly, either through our website, the eagleforumca.us website, or you can just contact me directly at eagleforumca.leader@gmail.com. But in that email in December, I basically went over the things that we talked about tonight, and our action steps were the letter that Hagman had put together and requesting our congressman to sign on to that letter. And then the comment period was already over in December, but that we could read past comments and then submit our thoughts on a link. So I added that. And then to educate ourselves, I had about 5 different things. One being Senator Ricketts' letter to the SEC. So those were all things that were in our former newsletter. So if you didn't take notes tonight, You're welcome to go back to our December newsletter that got emailed to you and you can review those things. But my question is, so we got this extension, what's next?
I have one other question, if I may. This is Sean and Jackie. Does this NAC apply to other countries, their natural resources as well, or is it just the United States?
So these would have just applied to the United States because they were created on the vehicle was being created on the New York Stock Exchange. So it really was just meant to be here in the United States. But there are other nations that are experimenting with this and trying to do something similar. I think there's one in Costa Rica, but this one specifically was for our land
I
in the
see.
United States. Yeah.
Thank you.
And also, next steps, this NAC rule, because here's what the New York Stock Exchange did. They withdrew their application. So we heard rumblings probably first part of January that the New York Stock Exchange was having regrets at being involved in this. So if you were following our campaign, you might have seen us pivot and recommend, particularly through Frank Gaffney through Sovereignty Coalition. They started telling people to make some calls to New York Stock Exchange because we heard that they were starting to get a little weak in the knees on this. So we thought, well, then more pressure, right? So what happened is New York Stock Exchange withdrew their application. So that meant the SEC no longer has a rule they need to approve or disapprove. So it really was smart of the New York Stock Exchange because they withdrew the application, which means they can come back and reapply. And they don't have a rule from the SEC disproving it. So it was a smart play on their part. So we need to be aware that they could make a new application. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon, but we could see something come up in the future on that. So in the meantime, our focus is on shutting down the natural capital accounts on the federal balance sheet and digging that out from the agencies. So for now, the NAC issue is contained and we can focus on this other element, which is going to be even more interesting maybe.
Is there a push to target the SEC so that they actually do put an overall stop to this so it can't be brought up again?
Yeah, and that's what Congress is looking at. That is the proper role for Congress. I think this scared a lot of members to where we're going to see possibly some potential legislation that would cure that. And that is something like that develops, this group could be very, very helpful to help push something like that through.
Well,
May I make a comment?
Yes.
Hey, my name is David Dahl. I'm out of Nebraska. Thanks for your call tonight and your Skype. I got an invite from somebody else here in Nebraska. But what I'm really seeing here is small numbers of people doing great things. I applaud you with all my heart. It doesn't take huge numbers to get things accomplished. We stick together. I think of the Revolutionary War, George Washington and 3 to 4% of the population defeated the mightiest military in the world at that time. So I keep fighting, keep pushing forward. It doesn't take huge numbers to win victory. So I just applaud you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
David.
And if you haven't seen it yet, just to kind of piggyback on the ideas that we're talking about tonight, the epochtimes.com, it's EPOCH, put together the No Farmers, No Food documentary. And No Farmers, No Food goes into what she was saying about the Netherlands and what's happening there. And Germany just had the largest protest, I think, in history with their farmers protesting you know, the things that the government is wanting to do to restrict their rights to be able to farm on their own land and to make a living. So that is a current issue that we definitely need to be informed on if you are not informed on that one already.
And Summer, it was not only the Germans, but the French got in on it, and they were dumping shovels full of manure over the
Oh yeah,
fences onto the government's property
I
and
saw
shooting
that.
it through, letting the
Rather
government know what they think of them.
a rather appropriate response.
I think so too.
I
Margaret,
think it got everybody's attention. Oh, good.
Margaret, you had mentioned that the Netherlands had gotten involved in this in the year 2000. Could you explain that a little bit more and how that ended up affecting the farmers so they could no longer farm?
Yeah, so the European Union signed on to Natura 2000. And, you know, if you go, one of the things I did was I went to the Natura 2000 website and I compared Natura 2000 to 30 by 30, and it was the same language. And so they started it by saying, we are here to help the landowners. We are only going to work with through voluntary programs with our landowners to make sure that we protect the ecosystems and all of these great things. Well, they've really came at the Netherlands in the same way that they are coming at our landowners. They get them signed up in these conservation programs, which encumbers the private land. We're seeing that happen here in America. There's a ton of climate smart programs that people are signing up for. It's the same thing. They get them signed up into the program. And then once that federal nexus is on, then they can start restricting different things. And what they did in the Netherlands is they determined that nitrogen emissions were harming certain plants. Well, nitrogen emissions, of course, were coming from cow feces. And so that meant that it's really kind of interesting because there's a lot of reasons why they did this, but ultimately what they needed is they needed to free up the land for other purposes. So the only way to do that was to remove the farmers and the ranchers. So using the nitrogen emission excuse, the minister of nitrogen, they actually have a minister of nitrogen in the Netherlands, issued a report where she was telling the landowners that she needed to have 2,000 voluntarily 2,000 farmers and ranchers voluntarily sell their property to the government, or she would have to start enforcement of taking that property. And so that is what really kind of tipped off the whole revolt in the Netherlands. And but that's really, you know, where it went to. It went from, we are here to help you sign up voluntarily for these programs to, oh, so now you're going to have to voluntarily sell your property to the government there. And so you know, I mean, that's pretty serious. And you have landowners there who've owned their property a lot longer than we have in America, generational, that were told they were going to have to give up their land. And the movie No Farmers, No Food, I think, thank you, Summer, for pointing that out, because I don't know of a program that does a better job encapsulating what happened in the Netherlands and Sri Lanka, and then comparing it to exactly what's happening here in America. It really does bring it home. I know Cindy's seen the movie as well. It brings it all home. It's a very, very good piece to watch to get caught up on this issue.
Have the Dutch farmers had any success in pushing this back?
They have, in the sense that they have a majority now in their parliament. So they got more of their people in. That has created a bit of revolt, but they have a lot that they have to unravel. One of the things that's really very sad that you will see in the movie is that they've already started putting in these restrictions, and there are a lot of farmers in the Netherlands that have, instead of moving into a different lifestyle, have literally just committed suicide. And so we're seeing the real human effects of what has happened there. So hopefully they'll be able to unravel these things. But right now they're really in the worst of it. But there has been a turnaround from the political side.
I have one more question. this is very close to my heart because we are one of the few homes in our neighborhood who escaped the terrible fires in Santa Rosa of 2017. And I'm actually writing a book now comparing what we experienced to what has gone on in Maui. I really do believe that that was a government land grab, and those fires were actually set because it was only the wealthy homes that survived, all of the old historical homes, sorry to say, but the ones they'd wanted to get rid of for the longest time, they're totally destroyed, but not any of the wealthy homes were destroyed. So you knew that this had to be targeted. And I truly believe the fires here in Santa Rosa were also targeted. They had already decided what part of Santa Rosa they wanted for redevelopment. And that's where the fire destroyed 2,200 homes. But fortunately, those people were so determined that they were not going to give up their property. Most of them have been able to rebuild. And so the city had to come up with another area for redevelopment. But there's just so much proof that these fires were so similar. A normal brush fire, a forest fire doesn't melt all the metal in the homes, destroy the cement foundation, melt all the glass, and a forest fire or a brush fire is not hot enough to do that. We lost 5,600 homes in Santa Rosa. They lost 2,000 in Lahana. And there's just so much similarity between both of them. And it's just so sad what governments will do to bring about their agendas, destroying people's property, either how you have told us they're planning to do this or through fire. And the fire part is really hard, you know, how do you fight that?
Well, that brings up another great point, Orleen, that in our newsletter that you just put out, that I'll send out on email as well, but that you just snail mailed to our members. You talked a lot about the NGOs, the non-governmental agencies, and I heard you bring that up as well, Margaret. Can you elaborate a little bit more on maybe the role of NGOs in the NAC or other land grabs?
Yeah, so particularly the ENGOs, so the environmental NGOs, they are one of the entities that the Biden administration is really funding. There's a lot of grant money going to them to do things like go out and designate areas where they want to expand ecosystems, and they go out and they encourage landowners to sign up with conservation easements. And these conservation easements, it's a device where landowners can enroll their land in a conservation easement or sell their conservation easement. They're really selling the development right to the land trust. And that is something that then transfers the control of the land to the land trust. And landowners get into these not really understanding what is happening. They think that their land is still private property. They think that all they've really done is make sure that their land will never be developed. But what happens is the primary entity that now controls the land is going to be that land trust. So it makes the conservation easement device legally should be called a conservation servitude because of how it functions. And we tell people that it's their right to sign up for a conservation easement. Just understand that once they do, it's no longer private property once they enroll in it. So these conservation easements are a big, big tool that land trusts are really pushing on landowners to keep their land in open space, to fight all of this development. They tell landowners next to growing cities, if you put it in a conservation easement, then your land will always be beautiful. You'll always be able to keep it in agriculture. And so a lot of people sign into that. That is one of the things that we are really concerned about. They are being put in place across the nation on the private lands very quickly. A lot of money's going into it. I have a daily feed that of all the stories on new conservation easements that are being put in across the nation, and it's pretty scary how quickly that's happening. And the reason I say that is because entities like the Nature Conservancy, they are one of the largest land trusts worldwide. They are big proponents of the 30 by 30 agenda. And they promote themselves as conservation groups, but they're really a real estate entity. They hold this real estate right. And the problem is that anytime you consolidate power, whether it be in an ENGO or it be in the government, the people are going to lose. You know, if we go back to our basic principles, what our founding fathers had set up and what they were accomplishing, there were a couple of things that they worked on. Separation of power was one of those principles. They fought against any consolidation of power. And one of the ways they secured that was they made sure that the federal government didn't own any land, that the federal government disposed of all the land to the people, so that these rights could not be consolidated. And but we're seeing exactly the opposite of that happen now. The environmental organizations are becoming very big, very powerful, very wealthy, and one of the largest holders of real estate in America today. And between them and then the conservation programs that the government is holding on private lands, plus the actual land they own, which of course in the West, being in California, you understand. Most of the time when I speak in the eastern states or private land states, and I tell people that 50% of the West is federalized and owned by the federal government, it shocks them because they're not aware that so much of our land is already owned by the federal government. Today in America, the governments, local, state, and federal, own 40% of our land. Only 60% is held by the private landowners. And it scares me to think about how much of that land is covered in conservation easements and conservation programs. It's a lot. And one of the things that we recommend to landowners is stay out of those programs. If you at all can, stay out of those programs. I truly believe the commodity of the future is private land without any of those encumbrances, because that is becoming the very rare asset in our nation. And that's scary because we're supposed to be a private land nation. That's how we, the people, control our government. That's how we, the people, rule. And so what I would recommend to your audience is when you hear politicians or land trusts come into your community and say, we have this great conservation program that is here to help you, what I hope is the hair will start sticking up on the back of your neck. And you will say, I need to know more about that. And not just buy into the PR push, the marketing push, which is we're here, you know, everybody loves conservation. This is always good. This is wonderful. It's fuzzy. It's warm. Who doesn't want to do this good thing? That it'll kind of raise the hair. And I would also say coming into an election season, this is kind of my litmus test looking at who do you vote for. Right now, what I'm looking for are the Churchills, not the Chamberlains. And I think that's a really good way as you're evaluating candidates. And, you know, the ones that I talked about, Ricketts, Hagman, Westerman, Oaks, they're all statesmen. You could put each one of those up on a stage, put them under fire and attack, and they are going to rise above it with good intellectual arguments. They're statesmen, but they are also Churchills in that they have a backbone and they will fight for our country. They are not Chamberlains that are going to compromise those principles and values. And that's what we've got to be looking for if we're going to really take back our country.
Well, I'm so proud of everybody on this call for asking such thought-provoking questions. I feel like this was a really informative conversation, as well as just having you give us a great talk. So thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm wondering if our national president, Chris Ullman, or if our former state president, Orleen Kurla, have any questions before we end the evening.
I did have one more comment for Margaret. I've been told here that the way they entice people to have a conservation easement, they tell them that they will have less property taxes on their land. Is that correct?
Yeah, because it devalues the land. So the development right is then transferred to the land trust. And that oftentimes is your most valuable part of your property. So that goes on the Nature Conservancy's balance sheet. And to carry this through the NACs, the Nature Conservancy would be able to enroll those in a NAC with or without the landowner's permission and gain a profit off of that enrollment. It's a separate right. So yes, it devalues the property. So your taxes will likely go down, but that's also because you don't control your property anymore.
And is it also true that you cannot then will that property to your children?
Correct.
Not the conservation easement. You can the remaining value of that land, whatever's left of that land. But what comes along with that conservation easement is a list of restrictions on the landowner. So when you read a conservation easement contract, there'll be a paragraph describing the conservation purpose, which the land trust executes, which now controls everything on your property. And then there will be pages of restriction on the landowner. The landowner is the one who can't build two houses, who can't put in a new fence, only repair the existing fence, who can't, everything is locked in, what they can and can't do on that property. And that's really the thing that landowners don't understand is they're the ones who are restricted. They think they're saving their property from development, but only from themselves and future generations permanently, forever. These are in perpetuity. And here's something that's interesting is that land can be condemned with the conservation easement. Any land in America can be condemned for a public purpose. So if the city decides we need a power line
At least
through
four
your
from
property,
Nebraska. I thought there'd be more.
from your property, across your property, they can condemn that property. The conservation easement doesn't save you from that. So again, the only people restricted from using the land is the landowner.
Well, that really explains it well. Thank you.
Yeah, my neighbor did this back in the early 2000s. She had an acre that was on the other side of the street from the rest of her property. And it sits on a corner that all of the other neighbors drive by. But yes, it has no fence. She can't even plant anything there. The only thing she's allowed to do is mow it so that it's not a fire hazard. Um, and I was just like, well, what if she has one daughter. It's like, what if you want your one daughter to move home someday and build a house there to be with you? And that's no longer an option forever and ever. And that's kind of sad that it's just going to be this vacant lot. I mean, it's not beautiful. It's not giving habitat to any special kind of wildlife. It's just going to be a vacant lot is what it is.
That's a good example. That's a very good example.
It's very tragic. Well, this has been so enlightening. I know we have a lot of people probably on the East Coast and Middle America that this is really late for them now tonight. So maybe we should kind of bring it to a close, but thank you so much, Margaret. As I wrote to her in one of our email correspondence, I truly think that she is one of our great American heroes. The fact that you have been able to find out about this so early and lead the battle to fight it, just amazing. I hope you were written down in American history books. This is just so important what you have been able to accomplish on behalf of all of us. So thank you again, and thank you so much for being part of this webinar this evening.
And Margaret, just to conclude, we didn't really hear what your passion is and what your experience or background is that got you to the point where you are today.
Well, Orlean kind of summed it up pretty well. So we bought a ranch. My parents bought a ranch in Nevada in 1978, and I think I was around. Well, I was born in '67, so I was around 10 years old when we bought it. And just immediately, from day one, the Forest Service filed an application over all of our water rights, and then started taking our water, and then that led to just a ton of restrictions on our property and our use of the lands. Of course, it was a a ranch that was a combination of private land and federal lands. And so, we went through 3 administrative appeals processes that we won, but they would just come back and do the same thing to us the next year. So we really didn't win anything. And so finally in 1991, my parents decided to go ahead and file a takings case. So they filed the very first federal lands grazing takings case in the U.S. Court of Federal Claims. And that was after about 13 years of fighting the federal government, the Forest Service, and the BLM on the ground. And then we spent 27 years in court fighting them. And that included, there were 3 cases that were overlapped during that period. We went through a 15-year water adjudication battle where we had to prove up all of our water rights on the land that the Forest Service was trying to claim, which we did successfully. And the State Water Adjudication Board said we owned the water. Yes. And then 5 months after we filed our takings case, the Forest Service filed 2 criminal charges, felony charges against my dad, in order to try to pressure him to drop the takings case because they were very afraid of the takings case. So he actually ended up under house arrest for about 6 months.
Wow.
And believe it or not, you being in California, you'll find this surprising, but it was the Ninth Circuit that overturned his criminal conviction unanimously, which is kind of Ninth Circuit is pretty liberal. So that tells you that the Forest Service was definitely way out of line. So once we got past that, then our takings case proceeded. And the claims court actually awarded our family $14.4 million for the regulatory and physical taking of our property. And so we felt like we were progressing pretty well, but then they appealed to the U.S. District Court in D.C. And our case came before 3 federal judges, all from the East, who had no concept of federal lands. And so basically they punted and they decided against us based on 2 technicalities and said we didn't have standing or ripeness, which you could, after being in court that long, and you would think, of course, you have standing and ripeness, but it was really just the easy way out to not have to deal with the property rights questions that we put before them, which were pretty complex. We understand the federal lands issues are pretty complex. So we ended up losing everything, never got a dime of compensation, and we no longer have the ranch.
Whoa.
So, but I know and I kind of hate telling this story because it is a sad story, but it's also one of those things when all of us go through things in life that are not fair. We're all put through hard paces, but what matters is how you come out of it. And as Orlean said, it really is. I do feel like we were born into this battle, and we went through that process because there were things that we were being taught so that we could be effective in other ways. And I think that's what, as we get into these property rights battles that our nation are facing now, having that background and understanding of how the federal agencies work and how they can really destroy the lives of the American people. And that's really the heart behind what we do. And I just think, I feel blessed that we have that body of knowledge, which is so unique that very few people have. And I think it does position us to fight different and see the battle a little differently. And I do look at it as one of our assets. So it's a sad story, but I think it has its purpose, and its purpose is for good.
What a great story, actually. Isn't that, to me, that's such a biblical story, is when there's personal sacrifice that you can't tell why you're going through it at the time. But then as life continues, you see how it prepared you for what God's purpose and calling on your life really is. Amazing. Amazing.
I had kind of lost heart. I thought it was a victory. The last I heard about you, you had won that 14 million, but I didn't know it was taken, or 4 million. What was it? I didn't know
14.
it was 14. I didn't know it was taken away from you. Isn't that amazing? And that you didn't give up hope. And are your parents still alive?
No, they both passed away. Mom passed away in 1996 and Dad in 2006. So it's been they never saw the end of the case. But, you know, I guess that's all part of the battle too. I will say Mom passed away when she was 54, and we attribute a lot of that to the stress that the Forest Service put on the family because, well, in 105-day grazing season, we were served with 40 certified letters of potential violations, alleged violations of our grazing permit, and 70 visits, meaning in 105 days, we had a Forest Service official knocking on our ranch house door, delivering some kind of violation. And it was all meant to intimidate. Well, you know, all of us were out working cattle. Mom was the one who was having to answer the door every time. And I really think that, you know, she ended up passing away from a severe stroke. And it really was just a lot of years of stress that came about from all that pressure from the agencies. So it has its personal toll. But the other part of that, though, too, is she was also had a very strong faith and belief. And so the other way you can look at it is, well, she got to go early, you know. You know, she went early to a really great place.
I'm sure she did. Was your mother Helen Chenoweth? How did she come into this story?
So after Mom passed away, Dad remarried about 5 years later, and he did marry Helen Chenoweth.
That's right.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know, she became an amazing congresswoman and so courageous and brilliant, just like Margaret and her father and her real mother. And is Helen Chenoweth still alive?
No, Helen passed away about 6 months after Dad did. So in 2006, 2007. Yeah.
Wow, I'm so sorry. Well, they are probably smiling and so proud of you looking down from heaven. What an amazing daughter you are. I get teary-eyed thinking of what you've gone through, and you've come out so beautiful and smiling and courageous. You have not made this taint you in any way. You're really remarkable.
I'm going to add, this is Lou again from Health. I am so glad I came on this webinar. I have been on as many as y'all have been on over the years. This is literally one of the best ones. And I've had a government injustice, nothing. I thought it was huge. It was all three of my kids' college educations in Alabama. That's a big thing.
Wow.
And then my father too. And I thought, well, it prepared me to understand him. Your story. Look, property taxes in general, that's a kind of part of this because they're using that to squeeze people out of lands. If we don't get rid of property taxes on our property in this country, I know they go to schools and other things at different levels of government, but if we don't get property taxes off of our land in this country, these kind of schemes are going to continue to grow. And Margaret, I'm so glad to have met you over this webinar, and I think I'm in your battle. I'm in your battle here.
That's great to hear. Yeah, property tax is a huge issue here in Texas. I know Cindy is very embroiled in that as well, but that's a big fight here too.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and helping us to get to know you a little bit better. And we can see why you're such the warrior that you are. And you're helping to save America. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And you all are doing the same. You know, I think we all have a role in this, and none's bigger or smaller than the other. Everything we can put into this fight is worth it and is important.
Well, please update us on any calls to action. We will do our best to get them out. And God bless you. Thank you so much for coming on our webinar tonight and informing all of us.
Thank you as well.
Could we have a closing prayer, Summer, so we can ask for protection for Margaret?
Yes, absolutely. Peter was waving at us. I don't know if he was saying goodbye or maybe he was just saying goodbye.
It's nice to have you with us, Peter. You're one of my favorite people.
Wonderful seminar. Thank you so much, Margaret, for your example. It's almost like Joseph, who said that he was put into slavery for the glory of God, so he could be a wonderful prime minister later on.
Really good example. That's very good.
If Peter's one of your favorite people, would you like to ask him to pray?
Would you like to give our closing prayer, Peter?
Okay. Lord, please watch over all of these activities, stopping the NACs and the taking of private property, because in the Constitution, relating to happiness had actually to do with private property. So help us to retain our rights so that we could show the glory of God in all we do and bring in the kingdom of God and restore revival to this country and honoring the Bible, and that you would not favor any of these leftist tyrannical moves of using environmentalism to move communist and socialist Marxist ideals and CRT over this nation. And thank you for all the American Stewards of Liberty has been doing. I've been a member for years. Thank you for Margaret's example and her witness, and all Orlon does, and all of Eagle Forum and Summer, and help us to all do our part as was requested, that God's will be done and we will protect the Christian worldview in America. In Jesus' holy name, amen.
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 That was a great
Peter.
prayer.
That was wonderful.
And thanks for being a member.
You're welcome.
And hi, Cindy. I remember you from the National Eagle Forum Conference. Thanks for joining us tonight.
I'm so glad I saw it today and was able to join, because we need to do something like this for Texas. So thank you. I mean, we've used Margaret to write newsletters, or write our torch and give us an article, but she is so helpful and we're so blessed to have her here.
You
So,
are.
thank you guys for putting this on.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording.